Hello everybody, Adrian Plass here,
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
and it is number 224 in Sounding the Shallows.
It is, and I'm sure everybody would feel it's a wild week. Horrific news coming from all over the world, almost. Personal stuff from the person who owned Harrods, and terrible, terrible news from Lebanon, and then underlying that, the whole situation with Gaza, the whole situation with Ukraine. And it's raining here, isn't it? It's grey, it's dull, and it's dark.
Yes, and I realised today that pouring with rain is a spoonerism for roaring with pain.
Oh, wow, Adrian.
So
I didn't know you were going to say
They do
that.
kind of connect
Oh, my gosh,
somehow.
they really do.
Anyway,
And I think it made it even, I don't know, I hope other people have had moments in the middle of this that are good, little moments that just give you hope. You know, I heard some extraordinary stuff, Adrian, and I'm sure other people have heard about it too, in Afghanistan, how women there, the most oppressed women maybe anywhere in the world, are determinedly finding hope. They're going to the UN with messages of how hope can survive these really, really difficult things. And those little moments of hope, I don't know how they manage it, but they clearly do. And I thought we had an email this week.
Can I just say before you say that?
Oh,
it
yeah,
reminds me
sorry.
of Hugo Green, who was a friend of ours, who was a Jewish rabbi, and I remember him saying to me that in the camps, his father, who sadly died right at the end of their stay in one of the camps, said to him, "You can live without food for quite a long time. You can live without water even for a day or two. But if you and I run out of hope, we've had it. We shall stump." And I think that hope in its best sense isn't a wild, roaring thing.
No.
It's I'm not sure what it is, and I'm not sure what it's always based on, different for everybody. But yeah, hope is an essential part of survival.
Yeah, and we have to keep looking for it, I suppose is what I'm thinking, because it feels all pretty hopeless. Hopeless, doesn't it? I mean, there's just too much awful stuff going on, which is why, it's why we love getting emails from people. Sometimes they're really hard to hear because people are struggling so much, but just the very fact that they've made contact and are talking about it is maybe very encouraging. But this particular one, this is somebody who some time ago wrote to you about a book that you wrote quite a long time ago now called Jesus Safe, Tender, Extreme. And she was saying that she's been undergoing cancer treatment for a year, and it's been a roller coaster. But she said, "I find myself steadied by the same Jesus you doubt and love all at the same time." And I was really moved by this. And then I was really tickled because she said one of the things she loves in the book is a story, and it's a true story. And I would like you to read some of it because I had forgotten it amazingly, because it's a long time ago and it's something that happened when we lived in. To be honest, I couldn't think what she was talking about. And then I thought, I'm just going to look it up. So I found Jesus Safe, Tender, Extreme and found what she was talking about. And it wasn't one of our greatest moments, really. Do you remember we'd gone to this huge shop, most of which, actually, if I'm honest, we didn't like the stuff, but there was one type of furniture that we really liked and we wanted to buy something else in the range. Can you remember what? Anyway, here we are, Adrian.
Right, I do remember it very well, indeed. As you say, not one of my finest moments. So we found the piece of furniture that we were looking for. Okay, so it starts from there when we caught sight of it. It was exactly what we needed, a good price too. And I decided to sit down so that I could get a better view of the underside of it.
Being sensible.
Being sensible, yes. As I lower my weight into what I have assumed is some variety of wooden chest, there is an ominous splintering sound from beneath me, and I make an abrupt descent for a distance of about 3 or 4 inches more than I had anticipated. Unfortunately, my response to this alarming event is a panic-stricken struggle to get up very quickly. This is ill-advised. A further succession of cracks like pistol shots echoes across the vaulted roof of the warehouse, and the descent of my person for another 6 inches or so renders any kind of swift ascent utterly impossible. I am now sitting right down inside the wooden chest, with my legs dangling over one side. My wife gazes down at me in frozen disbelief. I am interested to know what she will say. Her comment, when it comes, seems to me just a little lacking in compassion. It looks as if you've just bought yourself a smashed-up chest.
Yes, well, I didn't remember saying that, but I can remember the whole thing. It wasn't even just that, was it? I mean, you did manage just about to extricate yourself from this disaster. But if you remember, it was what happened next that was so fascinating. I don't know, whether it was just that nobody wanted to take responsibility. Tell what happened.
I think it was really that there was no set
Response.
way to respond to what I found a youngish man sitting at a desk, and I said, "Can you help me? I'm afraid I've just smashed a piece of your furniture by sitting on it or in it, and obviously we will pay for it because I have totally destroyed it." And he looked at me with panic in his eyes and said something like, after a longish pause, I think I'm going to have to go and find somebody else to tell you what to do. So a second man appeared, and I think equally puzzled by what was going on. But eventually he said, "I think I'll have to go and get advice on this." And he also went off. So I was waiting for him to come back. And as we hung around in this furniture department, I remember us musing on the fact that we might have to work our way slowly up the
Up the ladder.
Up the warehouse command chain until we reach the chairman, who'll drive down from some distant town with a couple of members of the board and make a final resolution possible. Anyway, I remember there was a short period before anyone came, and then somebody else came, and then he brought a woman down. And the woman was very nice, actually. In fact, she said, with a twinkle in her eye, "If you don't like our furniture, why don't you just tell us instead of smashing it to pieces?" And we all laughed. And the woman explained, just very quickly, that the chest wasn't a chest at all. It was a thing from the top of another piece. And
so it was one of those sort of boxes on top of a wardrobe.
That's right.
That was made of very thin wood, and it's not at all what it looks like on the surface. So it was not a wooden chest. It was a very fragile little thing. But the interesting thing is one more thing. When I was reading this, that really intrigued me, because I remember this was a very large store. It would have been very possible for us to calmly or hurriedly slink off, leave.
We needn't have gone to see the first man.
Not really.
We could have run for it.
Well, we could have done. Especially as the idea of paying for this now shattered few bits of wood. But there was one thing that happened after that, wasn't there?
Yeah. Well. What happened first was that we said, "Well, we'll pay for it, obviously," and the woman said, she said, "Well, we won't charge you the retail price of this because it's only a bit of another thing." And she said the original whole thing was just under £100. I thought, oh my God. And I thought,
huge amount of money for us.
Well, it's still not a small amount of money. And so I said, "Well, okay, fine, you find out." So she went off, came back, and I think it cost us £50, my
I'm saying is even
pieces
50,
of
50 years ago was quite a lot of money.
It was awful. Yeah. So then the last thing that happened was that the second man who we'd had contact with was delegated to help me take the pieces of the whatever it was I'd smashed up out to our car. We didn't want them, but just seemed a good idea. So we took them out to the car, put the pieces into the boot, and shut the boot. But it was then that something, and I think some of the tiny moments in life are some of the most outre, the most significant and odd, because I put the boot down, and then I turned to him. I was going to say, well, thank you very much, goodbye. And he stuck his hand out, and he obviously wanted to shake my hand. And he looked at me very earnestly, and I shook his hand. And then we got into our car and drove somewhere to throw away our pieces of wood.
Yes,
but
probably on the way home.
But the thing that I asked myself then was, what was that little bit about? And obviously I don't know, because I wasn't in his head. But it just struck me, or struck us, didn't it, that probably somehow he was saying, thank you for being someone who doesn't run off when you've broken our furniture. So I expect they have a lot of things that go on in there. And I hadn't wanted, I mean, as you said, I mean, you know, I think about 75% of us thought, well, let's get out of here quick. But the other 25%, I thought, I'm glad to say, and we'd have found it very difficult to do that, actually, to be honest. We really would. And there is a significance in the effect that a small act has on people who are used to experience.
Yeah. I suppose we both like to think that he went home with feeling that there was something good had happened that day, something funny, but something good. But what I was interested in, Adrian, you finished that chapter saying, what a relief to know that Jesus works at, and gave it a name, warehouse. Yeah. And it took me right back to what we've been thinking about so much. You know, we keep going back to that idea, what would Jesus do on the wristbands of many people, and thinking we want to keep that because that's an example, but also we want to keep what is Jesus doing. And I think at that moment, and actually I don't want to claim it just for Christians, I think there would be many, many people who would have that moral dimension within them that is that thing that we believe is put in by God, which is a deep down knowledge, whether we want to think about it or not, of right and wrong. You know, a lot of parents bring their children up to actually understand that difference, whether they would say they were churchgoers or Christians or whatever. But it is that, what is Jesus doing at that moment? And I was struck by something else. I found in our bookcase a book called What Would Jesus Do? And it's actually by the great-grandson of the original author of a book like that. I'd read one quote, Adrian, because it's really got into it.
It's a quote from the book.
Well, it's a quote from the book, but it's actually a quote from the Bible. And it's to do with one of those other things that can become a command, can feel like an ought to or a should do. And that's the whole thing about forgiveness. You know, who do we forgive? Who do we decide to forgive? And this is a quote. He's saying, listen to the instructions Paul gave to the Corinthians about dealing with a brother who'd got caught up in sin. And it's from Corinthians. And I don't remember reading this, or if I have, I think I've forgotten it. Now instead, you ought to forgive and comfort him, so he will not be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. I urge you, therefore, to reaffirm your love for him. Yeah. And I thought of all the people who get in a mess, and how it isn't a case of us standing on some moral high ground and thinking, I forgive you from a distance. It's realizing that if we don't, if somebody doesn't feel cared for, forgiven, then they might well be overwhelmed with sorrow, as he says in Corinthians. But that can mean you go off and do something absolutely stupid. you sin again. You say, oh, well, nobody cares. Why shouldn't I do it again? Not that I'm suggesting you could have possibly gone around stomping on fragile pieces of wood in any other furniture stores, but you know what I mean?
Well, it immediately makes me think of one of the other things that we consistently drag out of our vast repertoire of things that we say. Honestly, some people must be so tedious.
Yes, I know.
But you'll know what I'm thinking of course. It's St. Francis, and St. Francis tells the story of being woken up in the middle of the night to hear one of the brothers crying. And of course, in their order, they had vows of poverty and chastity, and life was tough for them in their days.
It's a very harsh rule.
I don't know if it was harsh,
no,
but
that's probably not the right word.
It was
strict.
tough.
Yeah,
it was
tough.
strict. And so he hears his brother weeping in the distance somewhere in another room, I suppose, and goes to see him. And they don't have a lot of food, and he asks him what is the problem, and he says, I'm so hungry. And that obviously there are, bearing in mind what you just read, there are 2 or 3 options there, aren't there? He could have said, no, you pull yourself together, you made a vow, etc., etc., etc. So what he actually did, do you remember what he did?
Of course I do. He went and got all the food in their storeroom, and they had a midnight feast. Not just him and this one other brother, but he woke everybody up, and he said, in this moment, we're just gonna eat. So he broke all his rules for the sake of one person.
And for the sake of their movement,
Yes.
because in the end, what he's saying is, what we're working towards is a feast. We're not working towards everything being miserable. We're working towards an end which produces a feast. And that's why Jesus said, I haven't come to get rid of the law. I haven't come to say nothing matters. But he's come to say that the most profound platform of the law is love.
Absolutely.
And that if you hurt somebody in a position where you could actually bring them back to feeling okay again, you are not fulfilling the law.
And you're not being weak or liberal. You're taking a moment in time. What is Jesus doing?
Yeah.
And
that's why it could be a little misleading, the what would Jesus do? Because what the fundaments of what he would do are, but actually it's bewilderingly different in every...
There aren't any gospel stories about going into large warehouses and what would Jesus do if he sat on a fragile piece of furniture. No, there aren't those. But, we come back, don't we, to those words. God so loved the world that he gave his beloved Son, and he didn't come. He came to save, not condemn. So, it's hope, isn't it? And unless we keep hanging on to those moments of hope that we can be a bit more than we would like, part of us would have loved to run. We can stand sometimes and be just a little bit more than we would like to be. And we do have, we have the most extraordinary example in Jesus, but we have it in a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, it's an odd tension because I remember writing something once about one of the things I always enjoy writing is exploring what would happen, and not knowing until I write it.
Was this fiction or?
This is fiction, yeah. And it was a story about me and about the idea that a man comes to the door and he says, I've come, very smart-looking man with a bag, and he opens the bag and dumps some packets of currency notes on the table. And he says, I've been deputed to come and see you to say, I would like you to give up speaking and writing and the other things you do. And if you do that, we will give you £5 million. And he says, here's a deposit, you can have this. This is about £100,000 here. So you can take that, or you can, that's you've only got the few minutes I'm here to decide that, and then I'm going to go, and that will be your only opportunity to do this. So I write the story right up to that point, and then, as I always do, try to look for the truth in myself. And there's a bit of me that would love to have £1 million because I could do all sorts of things with it, and it'd be great. And you could tell yourself that actually it was weird, because this man says you don't have to stop doing good things for people or anything like that, but you've got to give up actually telling people anything about this faith thing. And I know I wouldn't. I wouldn't have done it for £10. I wouldn't have done it for £10 million. Because if I had, I would have dragged something right out of the base of my being that would have left me absolutely poverty-stricken.
Well, it's interesting, Adrian, because I'm turning that on its head at the moment, and we have a family we know very well who's going through the most appalling time at the moment. And I know that this whole family would never give up on their faith because of it. They would never, ever say, I'm just going to turn my back. I'm going to run away from everything I've believed up to this point. In fact, it's the opposite. They're turning to it. What is Jesus saying? What can Jesus do? Where am I with this Father who's always loved me? And they are bewildered because everything that's happening to them would seem they've been abandoned. But it's the opposite that we're seeing.
They're pretty strong, actually, in their continuing belief, but very frightened.
Of course,
Very
because
frightened.
that's the truth.
Yeah.
It's the life at the moment is for many people very, very scary. And it's which way do you go? Do you run away from the thing that is frightening you? And I'm not talking about facing up to smashing up bits of furniture, but maybe I am. Or do you turn the other way? And
That's one of the great challenges, because so much crap is talked about Christian living that sometimes it's very hard to get your ideas straight about it. But these people are they actually have a profound belief in what they believe, and if you have a moment to think about them, obviously we can't say who they are, and to say a small prayer would be very great without even knowing.
Well, thank you for the email that triggered all this off and made me go back and laugh about something that happened. To be honest, it could be happening now. I think we seem to have an ability to do this type of thing all our lives.
I think I am a bit of a sitcom.
Anyway, as always, we love to hear from you, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye.